Well, welcome. Tonight, we're going to go over the town meeting articles. Again, our intention here is not to try and sway you, at least some of us won't try and sway you, to a particular side, but we really want you to know how we're spending your money and what are the pros, well, you know, the pluses and the minuses of each article. So why don't we start with introductions.
Chris Moran, member of the FinCom.
Vice Chairman of the FinCom.
Always a title.
Mark Shane, Chairman of the FinCom.
Mike Soares, newest member of the FinCom.
Newest. Okay, guys, Article 1. Anybody want to start?
To me, this is, out of any of the articles, I think this is the biggest no-brainer. This is reward to our veteran-owned property. There was a previous exemption of $400,000, and we had some properties in town that were pushing that limit, and in fact, this year going to exceed it. We wanted to move the limit of the exemption up to $700,000 in order to be able to accommodate these properties. It's of no tax change whatsoever because they were currently exempt, so we're just upping the exemption. So really, there's no cash change whatsoever. So we are favorable on this.
And we should note that the article is a typo in the article. It's not $700, it's $700,000.
Yes.
Yep.
And this was always when the Italian vets came to us and said they can't afford to run
Absolutely.
the vets hall
Yep.
if they have to pay fair market value on taxes. So as you said, we've been doing this for a long time.
For
It's
our
just
veterans, is
the property value is now crept up,
Yep.
and they would have to start paying taxes. Okay, Article 2. Want to go over Article 2, Mark?
Article 2 is from the Personnel Board. That was to continue the classification consultant for the, I'm having trouble tonight, classification compensation study that they started last year. We spent $5,000 on this last year, and we felt, the FinCom felt, that spending another $3,000 on something that was supposed to have been done and not done very well should be continued. So FinCom voted unfavorably, and
Yeah, I think
I
the
agree.
real issue was we just spent $5,000 last year. So now we're going to spend another $3,000, and the presentation was we're going to do basically the same as what we did last year.
There was no question. The only really thing that they added 5 new towns, basically to change the demographics of the study, to have a closer median income to Milford. So they added the 5 towns. So
but they didn't look at the median income. That was the point.
we got 13 towns for, I think it was even 4,500. And now we're going to spend 3,000 for 5 towns. I said to them, I don't think we're getting a really good deal here.
Well, the
So-
other thing, too, is when you look at it and you say, okay, we're adding 3 new jobs this year. So next year, my question was, is this going to happen again? You know, and again?
But I think the bigger point here is the compensation study that they did, that they presented to some of us last year, was so complicated and so off the shelf that it didn't make any sense to do at all.
Right.
And to continue to do something that didn't make sense was a waste of taxpayer money, even though it was just
And I
$3,000.
think we all voted along with that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, we look at Article 3, earned leave.
the young guy.
Yeah, well, this to me, this one seemed like a no-brainer. You know, we were giving some reward time or sick time, personal time, if you took less than 3 sick days. So if in one calendar year you took less than 3 sick days, you would be rewarded with 1 personal day the following calendar year. To me, that seemed reasonable, and to me that was a net savings of 2 days compensation. So
And I think the biggest thing was we're already doing this for all the groups except for this one group. So whether you agree with it or not, because, you know, philosophically there were people saying, wait a minute, you should only take them if you need them. We shouldn't reward you for not taking something that you don't need. But on the other hand, having 80% of the town under one set of rules didn't make much sense.
And this is a long project of getting all these unions on the same page, and Aldo is the one that brings it up at every one of our meetings. I am in complete agreement with him. I wish just come in one time.
Yeah.
Let's even everything out instead of this piecemeal coming in one part at a time to try to get everything equal.
Well, but
It
Aldo
just
had a
doesn't
good
make
point
sense.
when he said, when you bring me little bits of each contract, it's hard to say this is equitable. Because contract A may have a little bit more here, but not enough here. But contract B is reversed.
But the bigger point here is these are all non-union employees. These are our Article 2 people, and they don't have a real voice as, quote, a
Collective bargaining
unit. Not everything that the unions get, the Article 2 people get, but we try to keep parity as best we can, and we've been doing that for years now.
But for us, it was a refer to sponsor.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we roll into number 4. Positions. You want to take it, Mark?
No, I mean, this is, it's just setting a new hourly rate and hourly position for an assistant at the administrative assistant senior center.
Right.
It was favorable vote.
Article 5, that was a little confusing for people. Milford and a number of towns had amended their bylaws to limit, to add further restrictions on where sex offenders could live. And then the court came back and said towns are not allowed to. So it seems like, okay, all the right intentions, but we cannot put extra restrictions on what the state's already done. So this just cleans it up. I asked the question, does it put us at any disadvantage? And the answer that I got back was no.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why we even had this was because all the other towns surrounding us did have a sex offender bylaw, and the police chief basically told us they're all coming here
Right.
because we don't have one. So ours is actually fairly recent until they voted that it's unconstitutional, and now none of those bylaws are valid, so at least now we're all in parity with everyone else.
So we roll to 7 and,
6.
oh, 6, collective
See?
bargaining. I jump right over it. I mean, this is a normal every year or every contract year article. So every 3 years, we have to deal with, you know, the lag in when they're signing their contract.
Yep. And then Jerry had mentioned to us, this isn't a contract that's done yet. This is just anticipation of that he hopes it can get done, and he doesn't want to have to wait till the next town meeting to be able to get these funds to provide to the police. So otherwise, if we didn't pass it here, they signed the contract in November, they'd be waiting for their pay all the way until the next town meeting. So this was in order to be able to have the funds available.
If it was
Before.
done
Yes.
before town meeting.
That's what I mean, before town meeting.
If before the 26th, they agree,
Agreed, right.
this allows us to
collect-
fund it.
Yes.
If they agree on, my understanding is if they agree on the 27th,
No, if they don't agree before the 26th, they're gonna pass
that's
this
what I'm
article.
saying, if they
Oh,
agree
yeah.
on the 27th,
Yep.
Right.
it's being passed over the 26th,
Correct.
they're gonna have, they won't lose money.
No, they'll wait till spring.
but they
They'll
have to
wait
wait
till
for
the
their money.
spring, and it'll be retroactive, they'll
Yeah.
just have to
Correct.
wait. Okay, Article 7, Planning Board. Zoning,
It's just sign restrictions and zoning, and we refer all the stuff to the sponsor.
It's another article or a bylaw that was ruled unconstitutional, so we can't have signs that are regulated based on their content. They have to be content neutral, so therefore we're only restricting the actual sign
size, not.
size.
Yeah, that
may-
pesky First Amendment thing gets in the way of limiting what's on a sign.
Correct.
There's a whole big discussion at selectmen's meetings about signs and,
But realistically, I think he's right. You can limit the size.
right, but
Yeah.
there's
But
other
that
issues
pesky First
involved.
Amendment.
The big
kind
thing
of-
is just the question of the enforcement now. That's
Right.
really what the question is.
And
So
there are
now,
other issues.
Article 8, there was a lot of discussion about funding. The article seemed like it was going to fund the assistant director who's already funded.
But no, the article is to fund the assistant director through the general fund as opposed to through the revolving account at the youth
Right,
center.
but it was already funded through the revolving account, so
Right,
that
right.
would free up the money to hire 4 new part-timers.
Right, and our discussion was come back in the spring when we do budgeting for the 2017 and we'll talk about it.
Right.
So we voted, they're gonna pass it.
They're going to
over.
pass it over. We go to Article 9, $30,000 on the youth center.
Yeah, they have some new expenses, obviously being in the other location. There was some mix-up of the utilities that we were supposed to transfer over, and this is some money to cover that, as well as some moving expenses. Last time when they moved from the armory to the temporary location, Actually, the director and the assistant director did the majority of the moving. When they get, and there was some damage done and that kind of stuff. So they're trying to avoid that issue when they're moving back into the brand-new place. We don't want to be chipping walls on $5.5 million
It's not even
paint.
chipping walls. I mean, I'm worried about chipping their backs.
Oh, yeah.
The
Yeah,
liability
there's
is
a
just way too
liability
great.
here.
I mean,
Yeah,
for $3,000 or $4,000,
Yeah.
I mean, it was not a lot of money to move them back.
Yeah.
The one thing that you're absolutely right, we had moved $25,000 of utilities out of one account into another, and then this year we didn't.
Well, this is actually, it's an extension, a 3-month extension that we didn't plan on. The youth center is not complete on schedule, they're 3 months behind. So this money will cover the next 3 months in the winter months at the other facility. That's what it is. It's not that we didn't plan on any of this or there was no money in the budget.
No, but Mark, originally we had the budget for the big building.
Yeah,
So when we moved it out, because now they're in a little baby building.
Yeah.
The idea was they'll go back to the big building. We should have funded in the budget the utilities for the big building. We didn't. That's how they get asked for 25 grand.
Yep.
It's a year's worth of utilities that they need.
That didn't get transferred.
it's 3 months, it's 3 months in the other facility before they move back into the building.
Now, that is correct, but also you are correct that we didn't have the money for the big building because we could have just moved that over. So
But we
you're,
didn't know
you're
what-
both right.
But we didn't know what the numbers were gonna be. We said,
You're,
And that's
you're
why
exactly
one way
right,
or
and you're
another,
exactly
we
right.
did not put the money in the budget.
that's right.
Yeah.
So
But they didn't
it's
have
not like we're increasing
No.
what they're spending. This was, we just didn't budget it for the new building, or the old building.
Yeah.
We voted favorably.
We vote. Article 10.
Move on.
This will be an exciting one. The IT position.
It's not exciting. The selectmen and the school department have decided to go their separate ways for the short term. And we originally put all of the IT money in the general fund in Department 155. What we agreed to do is to separate out the district and the town with these funds, but leave it in 155. So we'd have a 155A and a 155B, and the district would get to spend that money for IT purposes only, and whatever funding that they had left, they would return to the general fund at the end of the fiscal year. And so it still stays in one fund, and eventually, if all things work out properly over the next year or two, maybe longer, it'll come back under one organization.
Well, I mean, the key is, we now know what we're gonna put into IT, and we know it has to be spent in IT. And the school committee did agree that although we have extra money in 155B, they're not going to just say, hey, I've got extra money, I'm gonna spend it.
Yeah.
You know, they've got an employee, they've got $4,000 a month for the manager position that they're currently planning on
Consulting.
using as a consultant. They've got $80,000 to pay for the loop
Complete
that
the
we
loop.
agreed.
Right.
And it's the loop, it's the firewalls, it's all the stuff. And then we got $300,000 in capital that if they can get the matching funding for, they can really leverage that.
E-rate.
The E-rate,
They get 80%.
66 or so, it's like 2/3 the E-rate pays for. So we got 300,000 put away, they could leverage that to 900
Right.
and really take care of the infrastructure.
Right.
And on the town side, right now, they've got that kid Andy, who just absolutely impressed me.
Yep.
He seems to really have common sense, knowledge.
We'll see. He's on the agenda for December.
He's on the agenda.
Our agenda for December.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So far, what we've seen,
Yeah,
Present-
absolutely. And as
Present our tablets and all the way. No, I'm serious. Got
but
till December.
Mark, you and I have gone at this now, it's what, 6 years?
Yeah.
I want the tablets, but I want to see them work before we buy them.
December.
If we had bought them when we first wanted them,
December.
they'd be obsolete.
We'll be done.
Okay, we look at the Article 11, heater controls
absolutely.
at the police station. Been on the 5-year plan.
Yep.
Is there really any, I mean, we vetted it at the,
You give armed people heat.
Yeah.
That's just a rule. No, this is something that has been planned for a long time, so we were favorable on this.
yeah, Chief Tom didn't even show up with a gun this time. Normally, The only time I see him come in with his gun
Money
is budget
articles.
time. When it's,
About it.
we keep kidding Chief too, he's gotta bring in an axe or something. Okay.
That'd be a sight.
The computer equipment, this is, I believe, payment 3 out of 4, which would be Article 12.
Right, 25K.
25K, we had committed $100,000.
To rotate their computers out
Over 4 years.
over
Yeah.
4 years, 25 grand a
Yeah,
year.
and that's why we try and make it clear to the town meeting that you're not voting for 25K. 2 years ago, you voted for 100.
100K.
Right.
Because you're not gonna renege halfway through and say, oh, we don't want the computers anymore, take them out. So that way we're clear, this is a $100,000 article that's spread out over 4 years. Vernon Grove, a dumpy truck.
Yeah, one of the things that we had looked at as a committee was North Purchase Cemetery was being neglected. And one of the ideas that the committee had was that Vernon Grove Cemetery, being in that business, would be a great person to take over the North Purchase Cemetery. And we put together a plan, and they ended up doing that. One of the things about that, though, is that Vernon Grove did have a truck that was aging to the point now where it can't even leave the property. It has that many issues. So now we're talking about that if they are going to be doing transportation back and forth to North Purchase, now that they're responsible for that, they're going to need a truck. As well as this truck gives them the ability to plow their own properties now, bring equipment back and forth, that type of stuff. So they're spending $65,000 on a truck, and I think it's going to be a good investment because, like I said, we had all had felt that North Purchase Cemetery had to be taken care of, and this is one of the things that they
Well,
needed to be able to do that.
Who's got highway this year?
I do again.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Because you can make sure, because one of the things Jamie
Yes,
said
yeah.
was that
He's
this
gonna
truck with the plow
Is going to help out.
would be available to
Absolutely.
Scotty.
Right.
So that's one less contractor
Yep.
at the expensive rate.
And I'm a
we have.
strong believer of that too. That our people should be the first people called.
Right.
And our equipment
and our
should be the
equipment.
first
Oh, yeah.
equipment used.
No question.
So, okay. Doghouse. Article 14.
Needs a roof.
I guess I can't call it the doghouse, it's politically incorrect. The Animal Control Shelter.
Needs a roof. It's, what, 14 years old at this point in time?
I think it's more than that.
More than that?
Yeah, 14 years, we wouldn't need a roof, but.
I think the
Apparently-
number on it was 14K. I think that's what it was,
yeah.
14K to replace it. Which,
No, you may be right,
I
because it's
think
been
it's-
15
I
years,
think
we
it's-
haven't done any
I think
maintenance
it's
on it.
14 years old, and remember, it's just a Butler building. It's not a real building.
Right.
And it needs a roof. The dogs are getting wet. Not a good thing,
People with guns need heat.
That's right.
Doggies need dry.
yes.
you know. So we
And that
voted
was
favorably
favorable.
on that.
Yep.
We roll into the railings, Article 15. Oh, Mark, don't have a heart
I'm
attack.
not talking about that. Somebody
Chris,
else.
you better talk about it, because Mark can't stay unemotional about
I'm
the
not.
railings.
I'm not far from him, but
Now,
it's
first
just,
of all, let's frame the railings.
yes, I
We have
apologize.
2 stories that are open in Town Hall. All around the opening and
Yep.
down the stairs, there are railings
Yep.
that our town administrator wants to replace.
Because the
they
gap,
don't meet today's standard.
correct.
Right.
And kids can go through
Kids can
there
stick their
and-
little head through and get
More
stuck,
than that,
or
their whole
slide
body.
their, little kids can slide their body.
Right.
Because the railings are too wide and go splat.
Right.
Yep.
And I can speak personally, my son is 3, he fits right through those railings. So I'm glad that they're doing this, because I always bring him to town hall whenever I go in.
I would have put up a sign, no kids allowed. No, I guess it has to be done.
Yeah.
It's an insurance issue. God forbid one of the kids falls
It's
down.
an insurance issue, but God forbid, how
Well,
would I
was gonna say,
look
God forbid
Yeah.
one of the kids
at
falls to the
you
first
and say,
floor.
we saved 13,000 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
$14,000, and your child fell and
Right.
got hurt because of it.
Right. Well, it could be more than getting hurt.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
a whole story down. It's a,
You know,
it's a
we're
big
rationalizing it, saying it's the exposure, but realistically, it's our kids.
job. Yeah, I mean, it's a liability issue, but, you know.
We rolled to 16.
Seems like this is on every town meeting.
Can't this ever
It's
get over?
unbelievable. What happens, and Jerry let us know, I mean, there's just constant revisions within the state on the adult entertainment industry, and he is constantly getting us in line with the changes that have been done. So we're gonna see it next time and the time after that. It just seems like a battle that we're constantly fighting in order to maintain within the laws that we can keep this adult section where it is and keep it legal, so we don't have issues like some of the surrounding towns had.
No, thank God we're doing it, but I feel like Bernie Sanders when I want to say, I'm tired of this damn article.
Yeah.
It keeps coming up, the adult, it's like
So we
just-
referred to sponsor on
it's like
that,
whack-a-mole.
like
Just
we
when you think you
usually do.
beat it down,
Scary that you're quoting a Democrat.
socialist.
Socialist Democrat.
Even better, a socialist. Okay, we run into the paying off the armory. Article 17. Mark, here's your favorite. You can feel good about this one.
Well, when we agreed to do this last year, it was a $5 million bill. And we spent $4 million in free cash last year, so we would not have to borrow money. Borrowing money is an expensive proposition over 20 years. And because we have some extra free cash, we decided, the FinCom recommend that we pay off the extra $1 million and not bond it. That does a couple things. It saves money in the long run. B, it allows us to not draw down the stabilization account any further than we have to on a school project. Plus, it leaves us with a little bit more capacity. God forbid we have to bond something that's serious. So it's a three-pronged approach to saving the town significant amount of money.
And I think that's the real thing. If we pay it off now, the return is much better than
Kids don't have to
borrowing
pay for it.
Our kids don't have to pay. Okay. So that'd be $1 million. We voted favorable. It come out of free cash.
Right.
Now we talk about another $50,000. God, it seems like Benjamin Moore, days of Benjamin Moore every year. Just another $50,000 to look at the water company, correct?
Correct.
Just more continuing discussion over the details, whether or not if we did go forward with acquiring the water company, what it would entail, how much would it cost, the feasibility of it, and we got to bring up the funds to find out how much it's going to cost.
If it's even viable.
Well,
Well, we need to know how much that figure will be.
it's going to cost
And
us
that-
at least $200,000 that we're going to put in by now, just to figure out,
Right.
Right.
is it viable?
Right.
I mean, something that we ought to look at. I mean, we're one of the few towns in the state that don't own our own water company.
Yep. And this is an ongoing thing, and we asked Jerry, like we ask Jerry every meeting, how much longer, and he just goes, it's gonna go till it goes.
Another Benjamin Moore.
Yep.
One more, at least one more year.
Yep.
At least one more year. So, okay, we roll now into 19. When you said it's a $5 million project, I didn't correct you, but
We all knew going in that it was going to be a little bit more than $5 million.
It's a 100-year-old building.
It's a 100-year-old, and some of us have toured that building, and it's pretty disaster. I mean, we were lucky that nothing serious really happened when we were occupying it before we renovated it. That's how bad it was. They fixed it. It looks really, really good. It's going to be nice when it gets all done. But they need a couple of extra bucks, not millions.
yet,
Yeah.
No, not millions. 267.
267.
267 is going to include finishing 3 rooms that they didn't have enough money to finish. It's going to include paving the whole area, which wasn't part of the original.
Putting phones and computer lines
Well,
in that
which is a whole nother
somehow got
issue.
overlooked.
Yeah, and they're
The
going to put in
additional 4 months of the architect's
right. You got to pay
fees.
for the architect and the engineer.
Yeah, well, you've got
and
almost
all that.
$70,000. Since it's going to go 3-4 months extra because of all the delays.
Well, plus the 30,000 we're spending on the others. I mean,
It's a-
and they're going to put in a backup generator, which was a big discussion originally because the building originally had a lot of water in it, which is part of the problem that degraded the building. And so they put in this massive drain system with some pumps to keep the building dry and clean. And what they also found out was that there's actually a river running under that building. And it's probably part of the major reason that it was getting wet. The issue here that we discovered was they had no backup for the sump pumps. If the power went out, sump pumps wouldn't run. Possibility of the water coming into the basement occurs all over again. So our committee recommended that they look at a generator, backup generator. They came back to us and said, we have a backup generator. We'll send one of the guys down to plug it in and start it up, and we'll be all said and good. And we said, what if you can't get there? So push comes to shove, they ended up putting in a gas line anyhow. We recommended, or they recommended, a gas generator, a permanent gas generator. It automatically fires, automatically switches over, automatically tests itself, and we don't have to worry about it ever flooding again.
And
hopefully.
it was more reasonable, because when they came back with
Yeah,
the
it was like
Manly
30
generator of 150,
Right.
I remember saying, okay, we're gonna hold
I knew
that
you-
number, but,
I know you were gonna get to that. Zig.
yeah. So you did come back with a couple options where you said a gas one will cost us 20, 30, maybe 40.
Right.
I think it ended up being with the pad and everything, 43,000.
Well, I think it's gonna be actually less, but we'll see.
But it's
gotta
still
go
in
out
the
to bid.
ballpark.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
150.
yeah.
It's not 150 K. I mean,
And that little extra, I think, with the additional security of having it automatic,
Right.
no one has to go there to refuel it, if it runs out of diesel, it's on natural gas.
Well, plus the diesel, natural gas doesn't leak into the aquifer.
Right.
Mark and I lived with our Worcester facility, where a little fuel line broke.
Right.
Emptied a lot of diesel fuel. We were very lucky that we had a containment pad,
Right.
so only a little bit went in, and it still cost me $45,000.
it's
to
a 21E
remediate.
issue at that point.
You know,
Yeah.
can you imagine if you drop 20 or 30 gallons into the stream running underneath?
Well, 96, that was what they, 96-gallon generator is what they originally quoted us, so.
Yeah, so figuring 100 gallons of diesel fuel being spread out, because that spring underneath would be very efficient in spreading it out,
Yep.
so.
Probably part of the brook.
So that was favorable on our side.
Yeah, and I think most of us on the board are hoping that this is the end. Between the state money that they've gotten, between this money, between the $5 million, I mean, we're at $5.5 million.
Chris, I wish I was young, thin, and had hair.
Yeah.
But when I look at the areas of that building that weren't finished yet, I don't think this is the end.
I
Well,
don't
then they
think
better
they're
have
gonna-
fundraisers.
They're gonna have fundraisers.
They better
I don't
have
think they're gonna
fundraisers.
I'm not
fly.
arguing with you, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
remember when they said it'd be $1? And we said, we don't think so?
And then it was 1.8 million, then it was 2.8 million, then it was 5 million, now we're at 5.5 million. Like I said, if you include state money, that was another $1.50. You roll that in, which state money's our money too.
We'll see. If it stays with a 5, I'll buy the coffee. Okay? Now, Article 20, Mark's favorite
I'm
article.
not talking about this.
Somebody else talk about it, Mark's gonna growl about
Well,
the
this
lights.
is to change the downtown decorative lights to energy-efficient LED lights. The utility cost right now, I believe, was $20,000 a year to run those lights. These LED lights are 90% more efficient, so that would bring them down to $2,000 a year. So we ideally recover the cost in about 2 years. I think to Mark's point, we aren't sure how long these bulbs are going to last.
They're $350 a bulb.
They're very expensive bulbs,
Just so you know.
so we need to make sure that they last at least 2 years to get our money back. So, I'm hoping that they will. I'm certainly, I think it's a good
The
investment.
part I felt comfortable was that, okay, we're gonna run this little pilot. But before we go through with the
Whole
10
town.
times
Oh.
bigger town,
Yes.
we're gonna let it go a couple years to see if the light bulbs do last. Because saving 18 to 20 grand a year, it was a year and a half payback.
Right. I
on the
mean, it's a good
30-something.
deal for that, no
Yeah.
question.
If it lasts 3 or 4 years, we've made out wonderful, and we should consider
Doing it
expanding the
yeah.
program.
Yeah.
If it lasts 9 months,
Not so much.
not so much.
They're supposed to last 7 to 10 years, running at 6 hours a day or whatever the number is. So, take half of that because they run all night.
Right.
Yeah, because it definitely is, to me, it's a good beta program, because the town administrator even brought up that they were looking at streetlights, which obviously is a huge
Yep.
project.
But it also, if it works, it's a huge savings.
There's no question, but to me, before doing a project of that size, I really
Let's
like
run the
the
pilot.
idea of letting this happen and see what happens.
We have to, see, you're probably too young for this, you guys. He may not be.
The gas lantern? The gas lantern?
His birthday is what?
Gas lamp, nothing. His family comes from Bedford. He used to go out and get the whale oil.
Years ago, back during the energy crisis in the 80s, I worked for a company that actually made these things. On top of every one of the street lamps, there was a timer that would come on at dusk and go off X amount of hours later, and it was settable anywhere from 2 to 12. And that was a significant savings across the whole country. When energy costs became cheaper again, and there was no crisis, and there was plenty of oil, they took all those away. All right, so that, I mean, and nobody we shut streetlights down in this town.
I was just gonna say, I mean, they'll do every other street light.
And that's not exactly the best thing in the world either. So if we could save money on LEDs, then I think we should try to do it and see where it goes.
Like I said,
before we go back to the other route.
We're doing a pilot.
Right.
We're risking $30,000. If it works, we expand it. If it doesn't, we don't.
Right.
Yep.
And there's also a little bit of state money, 25% of the cost will be picked up by the state.
Yeah, but that still brings us down to
Yeah.
that's what gets us
Our
to the
cost
30.
is
Gets us
30, yeah.
30.
Gets
Yes.
us down to
Yeah.
the 30.
Right.
So 21, town's hazard mitigation plan, 50 grand.
I think this is 50 grand, but I think this is the biggest article, or the most meaningful article maybe on this
Most
whole
important.
warrant.
Right.
We were made aware at our last meeting, excuse me, not our last meeting, the meeting before, about the town's hazard mitigation plan expires December 31st of this year. Which everyone says, well, that's not a big deal, we'll just renew. Renewal takes 2 years. So there's your big deal. And FEMA
And why do we care about renewal?
FEMA will not give you any money unless you have a hazard
So
mitigation.
all these grants that
Excuse me,
help us,
We don't know that they will give us no money. They will give us no money on certain
Preventative,
projects,
yeah.
preventative projects, if we do not have a hazard mitigation plan. So we could be talking about potentially hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars that we could possibly
Miss out on.
miss out on
Because-
if it's not planned correctly.
and I mean, candidly, it's because we didn't have a list of when these permits and all come due.
Yep. And we're still getting answers of, say that, I mean, it could be potentially even worse. I'm not sure if something like snow emergency like we had last year, are we gonna be eligible for that? So it
But at the end of the day,
potentially
now
could
we
be-
have a commitment from the town engineer that they're going to give us a list of all the permits and when they're due, so that you don't find out 2 weeks before a town meeting. Like you say, the 50 grand annoys me, but if I lose out on 2, 3, 400,000,
You're losing out on 2 years of FEMA grants.
Yeah.
Right.
And Article 21 is that. Article 22 was to do some more of Godfrey
now
Brook
let's talk
Yeah.
about,
for $360,000,
Yep.
of which we were going to get a grant for that, which we're passing it over now because we don't
We
have
don't
this
know.
as is. It's a domino effect.
Yep.
And so we start off right away losing a potential of significant amount of money on Godfrey Brook. Would have been 75% of the cost,
yep.
which would have been like $4.5 million.
Well, now we start learning, because we don't want to find out that these permits renew. We should know, but we're going to put it on our subcommittee so that it's a major, 50 grand is a major expenditure. We'll budget it. And it's not just the budgeting that bothers me. I want to know when it's due,
Yeah.
so we don't end up losing 2 years. Because God help that something happens, and we can't. And with our luck, it might fall into one of the categories that FEMA says no ticky, no washi. You know, you don't have a permit, we don't cover you. May not. We may get lucky and the snow emergency falls into something else. But it's 50 grand. We don't have a choice, and
Yep.
we're going to eat the delay.
Oh, we have a choice. We don't have to do it. And then we're not eligible for
Then-
anything.
then we're
Right.
not
Yeah,
eligible
well,
for-
Yeah,
So, I
there's-
mean, yeah, there's always a choice.
So the Godfrey Brook, Article 22, is being passed over.
Correct. Because of that.
Because of that, and we don't know.
Right.
You know, maybe since we applied beforehand, we still get grandfathered, but before we go spending the money, let's see if the grant. One thing I'm convinced of is once you spend the money, the state or feds are a lot less likely to give you a grant to do it, because they figure you already did it.
Right.
But what I understand is that we're applying for the grant, okay? And we will see by next town meeting if we got the grant and.
And
it's-
if we're grandfathered.
And if we're grandfathered into the December timeframe.
Right.
If we are, then we'll spend this money next spring.
Next year or whatever we
In the-
need
In the
to.
spring.
Because we did do a little talk about planning at that at our last meeting about shifting some funds for the thought that
Now,
we could get this.
When we rolled to 23, I got to admit, I didn't even know the Purchase Street School still existed.
You went there.
That was 100 years ago. All the other schools have been
Exactly
closed.
my point.
I
But
didn't
we,
either.
we apparently still own the Purchase Street School.
Yeah.
Yes, we have for a long time, obviously.
And the agreement is, we collect and rent what taxes would be,
Right.
but we maintain the building.
Right.
And there was some discussion about why.
Well, I mean, I don't think that the town ever really considered putting it up for bid. It was always being rented. It was a net zero to the town, except for the.
Now that it's getting a little older.
Yeah.
Getting a
Yeah.
little older. As it's getting to be 100 years old,
Yep.
so, not really, but.
No, but I mean, a 50-year-old building, all of a
It's-
sudden,
It's time.
this
Roof,
year, we've got a boiler
yep, right.
that we've got to
Chimney.
deal with 14,000.
So we've recommended to the selectmen that maybe they should consider putting it on the market and selling the building. At least we can get tax money back, okay, putting it on the tax rolls. And if the present owner is interested in buying the building, they could bid on it,
Sure.
and we'll see.
Well, I think the biggest thing is, if we're getting 14,000, now we've been told the laws have changed, they're no longer commercial, they're,
now
should be
residential.
taxable. So we're gonna get $8,000 a year.
Right.
But even if we got 14.
Right.
This one boiler's 14.
Just-
Right.
yeah, so there's a year worth right
If we
there.
had sold the dang thing, even if we netted $1,
Right.
we would get our tax money with no exposure,
Yeah, no liability.
no liability.
And there's kids there too. So that was the other thing that
God
we had,
forbid, yes.
that we had discussed about that. Say we don't put a new roof on, say we don't put a boiler on because we're fighting for some reason, and God forbid something happened, it's filled with children.
Well, that was
So-
Mike Nicholson brought up, have we done an environmental study? And it's like, wait a minute, if we haven't, we will. But more importantly, it's not, we wouldn't study the dirt.
You mean 21E?
Yeah.
Why would we do 21E there? It's always been a school.
Don't know.
It's never
But if you
been-
go to sell it,
But it's never been I don't believe you have to do a 21E if there's no hazard.
if there was no
Possibility.
reason to believe
Right, that
there's a
there's any
hazard.
hazard, you would
But
have
my
to-
point was, you wouldn't do that just to sell the building.
No.
If there was a potential reason, I want it done because you got our kids.
True, and if we do go sell the building, the buyer may request us to do a 21E. That's a possibility, but,
Okay.
that's significant
But we've
amount of money.
recommended that the selectmen consider evaluating selling it.
I think it's
So
a
that
very-
we get all the
yeah.
benefit with none of the risk.
Yeah.
New car for the fire chief.
Pass.
Chris, bail him out, or
no.
Mike.
Sure. Okay. So the fire department rotates their cars every 3 years, and it's not the same person gets a new car every 3 years. It's they pass it down. So the fire chief gets the new car. His car goes down to the deputy chief, and then the deputy chief's car goes to the building inspector.
The fire inspector.
Fire
Excuse
inspector.
me, thank you. So this is to purchase the next vehicle and rotate the cars through the loop. So there was some discussion whether or not we need to do this every 3 years, but this is the pattern that we have been doing. So we got a favorable.
But I think Mark had a legitimate question to say, okay, if this car's got 80,000 miles on it, most of the people I know don't dump a car at 80,000 miles. This is a much harder 80,000 miles. But the question is, has anybody ever studied moving it to 4 years? What effect does it have? Nobody's ever studied it. On the other hand, we wouldn't want to take a risk that the fire inspector's car breaks down when he needs it.
But, it's part of the command center as well, but I, as you know, I recommended that your subcommittee do an investigation of not only the cars, but the trucks as well. I mean, across the whole board, the highway department, the police department, fire department. And so we have some sort of data that says, it's not necessarily the mileage. It's not necessarily the maintenance cost. Maybe it's the hours per truck. I mean, there's a whole bunch of
Well,
issues.
you take the, next year we're gonna deal with the ladder truck.
Right.
It's $50,000 a year depreciation, right?
Well,
20
theoretically.
years, $1 million.
Right.
Portuguese math says,
Yep.
if you push it off a year, you just save 50 grand. Now, as you mentioned, you're never gonna do that if you risk
No.
one thing.
No, of course not. But, you know, in the real world, we used to have a gentleman on the committee that worked for Ryder, truck guy.
He did fleet rentals.
He was a truck guy. And, you know, between him and another person that I know that does truck rentals, they don't even consider trading in trucks until they have 200,000, 250,000 miles on them, okay, which is a lot of hours. So to trade something in that has 80,000 miles and whether it be highway driving or town driving, remember, town driving is not hard.
But
This is a
I
small
think it
town.
was legit to say to the chief, too quick, don't want you jumping.
Right, do it now.
Yeah.
Now we got 3 more years.
Right.
Let's figure out a plan, because his goes to the assistant, which goes to the inspector. So it's the 13th year of that inspector car. And you sit there and say, okay, if I'm taking $50,000, again, it's 12 grand a year. If we can push it off 1 more year times 3, that's 36,000 a year in savings just on the fire fleet.
Right. I mean,
So
we need to look at all of
36,000,
things.
it's worth doing a study.
Right.
Yeah, we need to look at it.
Okay, run into 25, the library.
Yeah, Sue needs some upgrades. There's certain things that she had needed, she had wanted for a while. She'd put them on her plan. Magnetic sensitizers, desensitizers, which that's that thing they rub the book on so you don't set the alarm off when you go in and out. She also had some upgrades to the circulation desk. I'll be honest with you, when I go into the library, because I go in there with my kids, it's the same desk as when I went in there. You know, and you know, you can tell from the gray, I'm getting old. So the point is I needed some upgrades. As well as she's doing an experimentation with a self-checkout kiosk, which some of us had, you know, raised some questions, because any of us who's been in Shaw's, and you've seen people with like that, like befuddled look on their face, because self-checkout is supposed to be easy, but it never is. We had asked her really about, you know, how is this gonna go? What are other towns seeing with their self? And it turns out not a lot of towns have them. So to be honest with you, we're gonna be one of the first towns in the area that's gonna have something like this. So I think it's gonna be interesting. So maybe we'll expand it in the future. Maybe it'll be sitting outside for Wednesday pickup for
And
trash. But, I mean, because I'm telling you, I don't care if there's a line at Shaw's, I will not get in that self-checkout.
No, but there are.
It's crazy.
Chris, you're getting over to the old people side.
Yeah,
There are the young people who, when you look at those self-checkout things,
yeah.
you know, it's all the kids, all the people our daughter's age and
Yeah.
all, that actually know how to use those things and make it work. So there is gonna be a transition.
Yeah.
It's an experiment.
Yep.
Seems like it's worth trying.
Yep.
Now, one of the more controversial questions, and we went through it on the 5-year plan, was why do we need a fence behind the
That's the
library?
next article.
Okay,
So we were favorable on 25.
Right.
favorable on 25,
For
and Sue cut
30,000.
down the circulation desk by calling Blackstone, and
yeah.
Yeah.
so that went down from like 12 to 3,000. So then that got our committee to
30.
say, yep, okay.
Yep.
The fence was a question none of us understood.
We still don't understand it. We have a fence between our property and the property behind us. I mean,
Behind them, who also have a fence.
There's a church and a temple behind that, the library. And over the years, the fence has degraded to a point where it's not in good shape. So the library director wants to put up a new fence, and not because she wants a barricade between the two properties, because of safety issues. People walk through there, there's stuff that's behind the fence, because both of those other facilities aren't open most
Well,
of the
you know,
time.
Yeah.
originally when they brought it up, Mark, I said, now wait a minute. You got the temple and you got a church. People who are going to services don't tend to be your rowdiest,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Why do I need to block out people going to temple or the church? So originally I was on the fence saying, I don't care, we're debating,
On
is
the
it a
fence, on
plastic
the fence.
fence?
Good job.
Is it what, but I'm not there. Then, when she told me the real issue, it's not the religious people who are doing
Yep.
good things. It's a lot of the homeless, they hang out back there,
The night crowd.
the
Oh,
night
because-
crowd.
Because those two places aren't open all the time.
Yep.
And apparently, the kids, if the fences aren't there, run through.
Right.
And when they've gone back there, they found
Bad
things that you don't want to expose a 12-year-old to, and things that you don't want to expose anybody to, like needles that are just left there.
Right.
So what turned me,
Is when she said basically it's to cut off the escape route.
yes,
Is really, to put
the
it,
young
to
kids
put it
won't
bluntly,
run through there.
Because they can't get out
And
of
the
it.
homeless, it's too inconvenient,
Yeah.
so they won't be leaving things and needles and all sorts of
Yeah.
stuff there.
Done
Yep.
and done.
Okay. Okay, here we go. $3 million to stabilization.
Great idea. Whose idea was that? Okay, we're putting $3 million to the stabilization. We're recommending we put $3 million to the stabilization account, of which $2 million will be used to reduce the borrowing on the school. We reduce the borrowing $2 million, a significant amount of money over the course of time.
$6 million.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money. And not only that, but again, we don't draw down the stabilization account because we have a $3.5 million debt limit. And next year, when this comes on the market, on the bond, when we bond it, the payment's gonna be $4.4 million. So we're gonna have to draw down the stabilization account by $1.1 million the first year. So if we could reduce that by $2 million, that's $200,000 payment per year plus interest. So it's a significant amount of money over the course of 20 years.
no
Well
question.
spent.
And
And
to-
the other
and-
million, I'm sorry, the
No,
other
go ahead.
million is going to the short-term capital account where we're
And again, that's
saving
one of the
money
things
for-
we talked to the Parks Department. I know, Mark.
Yeah.
But last year, we earmarked a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
Out of, you said 750 out of that is gonna go into,
Yep.
I don't know if we call it the short-term capital or the long-term
Yeah.
capital, but
It's
to me,
not
yes.
the big one.
it's
Yeah,
not
it's
the
not the
big
big
one,
one.
it's the little one.
Yeah.
But
We got
there,
about $2
now
million
we'll
in
have $400,000, and the idea there was, originally, we talked about another field by the tradesman at 2.1, gulp, but that was before the $5 million for the youth center.
And before
5.5.
Woodland is
And
built,
before Woodland went to
Woodland's gonna have
60
a brand
million.
Yeah.
new,
Yep.
And Woodland's gonna have
a full field,
a turf field.
full turf field.
So the idea is, just like Pheno Lights, we put a little bit away every year if we have it. And then eventually, you got 800,000, you can decide if you're gonna re-turf
Right.
another field.
Yeah.
But it also leaves money in for other things that might come and bite us. You know,
Oh, we still have, we have the truck and we have some big items coming up in
Well,
the capital.
next year,
Next year, $2.5 million.
you got a $1 million Tui toy.
Right,
You know, that one truck, that one big ladder is gonna be close to $1 million.
right. And we don't have to hit the taxpayer for that. We've already got the money.
We
set
already
aside.
salted it away, we don't have
Yeah.
to borrow. So the $1 million truck, gulp, costs us $1 million. Doesn't cost us $3 million
Right.
for borrowing.
And one of the big benefits that Zach had brought up is that by putting this $3 million in there, once again, because we're starting our big bonding now for the schools, that having that extra $3 million in there helps we get a better rate.
Right.
And then we're just gonna pull it right back out and pay it off. So we hit twofold there. We're gonna go and get a better rate because we had an extra $3 million in there, and then we're gonna take it out and then pay it off and save money on that end. So to me, I know people say to me, why are we saving so much money? You know, when you think about that, just that one transaction for the school, it saves the town
I
a
think
lot
my
of
answer
money.
to Mark today was very simple, not enough.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah,
plus,
yeah, yeah.
plus the finance committee 4 or 5 years ago came out with a philosophy, it was longer than that. And we agreed as a committee to make sure that in the stabilization account, we would try and keep 2 times the debt limit in case we didn't have any money and we wouldn't renege on our bonds. So by putting this extra money in there and drawing down that bonding, the $2 million, it keeps that stabilization account above that $7 million number.
Well, Mark, when you
Significant
distill
number.
it down, you look at towns around us. Friends of mine are getting their normal tax bill, and then a surprise. Here's a $500 a year debt exclusion on top of, right?
And as you call them, designer trash bags.
Designer trash bags, you get all these little, oh, you want to put a little more in on a school bus? That
Oh,
would
yeah.
be $200, thank you. All the little gimmicks go in, but at the end of the day, for years we planned for the school. We got a $60 million school
10 years we've been planning. for
that
school.
we're not going for that profanity, that 2.5 word,
Right.
or that debt exclusion. And I think this just follows our pattern of being very conservative, because God forbid a building blows down. If you had a real problem and the police department or a fire station blew up, that $6 million we have isn't going to go very far. And you get all excited because somebody can say, we got 20 million, 26 million in all these little accounts.
Yeah, good.
Let's see, one school just cost us 60, right?
There's no, to me, I don't even want to talk about it yet, but once the last stake is in on Woodland, I mean, we got to start thinking about planning for the future for the high school. I mean, that building's starting to get old too, so.
But again, it's
Yeah.
like always. You just keep going as we're doing, and when the day comes, we'll be ready, and we won't use profanity.
That's the plan. So we voted favorable on $3 million into the stabilization accounts.
And then we get to the last article. I saved extra minutes, where we have this philosophical debate always on how much money do we put back towards the tax rate. And if you think back, I think, Mark, you mentioned it, that it was Sal Cimino, when he came riding in with Paul Revere one day and said, we have extra money. We took too much. We should give some of it back. And that was a lot of years ago.
It was $1 million we gave back that year. It was over 10 years ago.
A decade ago, we started this where we said, when we get fortunate.
This is not the norm, by the way.
No, I mean, look at the hotels. You mentioned this year in hotels, you couldn't budget, what, $1 million?
$1 million.
Right. We budgeted 600,000.
Yeah.
$1
$1 million.
$1 million, that little 6%
Yeah,
rider,
This is our second year with the higher rate, right?
yes,
Yeah.
$1 million.
Oh, it's the best thing we ever
Yeah.
did.
For how many years we were saying nobody's buying automobiles?
Right.
God bless Kevin Meehan for still paying $5 million for the hospital, but
Yep.
for a lot of years, everybody said, with the economy the way it is, I've only got $150,000 on my car. I can wait another year. Well, it seems like this year everybody said, I want a new car.
Right. Well, the economy was picking up, so everybody decided it was the time to buy a new car. New car revenue was up.
Let's explain excise tax, just so
Excise
that, yeah,
tax.
so
The
everyone
excise
knows what
tax,
you guys are
right.
talking about. Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say excise tax
Yep.
because only he sells cars out of
Yep.
his driveway, not me. So excise tax money was up revenue-wise. Hotel tax money was up revenue-wise. None of this stuff we could budget. The budget to that level. And new growth was up significantly. We budgeted 400, it was 750,000 or 786,000. All of these things added in the best direction, as Murphy's Law would say. So that's how we ended up with $5.7 million in free cash. Normally, we go between 2.5 and 3 million.
And that's something.
Which is a great accomplishment in
Oh,
my
yeah.
mind.
And I mean, that's conservative spending on our department heads. It's also a little extra revenue here. It's saving money on the
But people have to
overlay
understand,
account.
that's hitting your budget number within 96%.
Right.
Right? When you say, wow, you had $3 million left over, it's round numbers, $100 million budget.
Right.
Yep.
So the fact that we had 2 or 3%, I mean, when I was in school, if I got a 97 on any plan, any test,
It'd be amazing for you.
or for me it would have been, but it would be judged pretty good.
Yeah.
And we've been doing that every year.
So, to make a long story short, the selectmen decided that they wanted to give most of that money back to the taxpayers, so they voted favorably on 2.8 million. The finance committee and the finance director came up with a plan, and the financial team came up with a plan that said 2 million was the right number to give back to the tax rate. Now, last year we were scheduled to give 1.4 back. We actually gave 1.8 back. So going from theoretically 1.4 to 2 million is a significant increase in return to the taxpayer. Please understand that the taxpayer receives $8 for every 100,000 we put to the tax rate. That's gross. That's not necessarily net, because taxes, I mean, revenue, I mean,
Commercial
property
versus
values go up.
residential and-
Right, and commercial gets one and a
biggest
half
benefit.
times.
There's no
Well,
question.
the biggest thing that people never understand is, of the $100 we bring in tax revenue, commercial is one part, and they're paying 1.5 times the rate.
The rate.
Residential's another. Some years, remember back, I think it was 3-4 years ago, when commercial dropped?
Yeah,
And the
residential's
whole,
gotta pick up the
residential went
slack.
up?
Resident had to pick it up.
I
Right.
saw a 10% increase in
Yeah.
my tax.
Right.
And everybody's having a heart attack, but you're saying, no, our levy only went up 1.8%.
Yeah.
Plus, if we do the 2.8, we end up taking to the spring about 1.7 in free cash, 1.7 million in free cash. Is that a lot of money? Yeah, it's a lot of money. Except that there are potential expenditures in the spring that could range anywhere between 1 and 1.5 million. That, a lot of which we haven't planned for. They brought it up last night at the meeting. It may or may not happen, but we can't leave ourselves in a position where we can't afford to spend that cash to fix these problems. Otherwise, we go back to the levy, we go back to the taxpayer
Well,
and
you
say,
go
yeah,
back
we
to
need
the
more
one
money.
stabilization, you go back to the
All of these
long-term.
places, and we don't want to do that.
But
So
you could do that without raising.
we could.
Let me ask you, Mike, you made the motion
I
to
did.
go with 2.8.
I did.
What was your logic?
Well, watching the FinCom over the years, I saw the plan. The savings plan and spending plan have been on the mark, and this 5.7 million, like they said, is well above the expected money that we've ever expected to have. So my thought was, we saved as much money as we wanted to, we spent as little as we wanted to, we have a chunk of money left over, a big chunk. So I was in favor of giving it back. I was on the losing end of that one.
Well, there were only 3 of us that voted for
Yeah.
it,
Well, but
and
it's
6
what-
went against.
But please, everybody needs to understand where that extra $2.8 million came from. That was a one-time anomaly
Yes.
that happened when the town went from a self-insured medical plan to a regular medical plan. And that was money that was left over in that self-insurance. We gave a third of that money, I believe, back to the employees who had bought
Overpaid,
insurance.
essentially.
And the other 2/3 came to us. So it was something that we never planned for. And yes, to give it back to the taxpayer, I don't have a problem giving money back to the rate. I do have a problem giving more money back to the rate than really needs. I mean, the money could be spent or used, not spent necessarily, but utilized much more effectively over the next N number of years than $64.
But Mark, that's going to be your case to make, to say, if I'm a taxpayer, if I go along with this article as is, I get $64 in my pocket.
One time.
Today.
Yep.
No,
Now,
$64 gross,
yeah,
okay? Not
hats off to
necessarily net.
Buckley, because if everything plays out, Bill's going to be running for re-election next year, and if the taxes have to go up because we don't get the $64, he's going to have to explain to voters, just as they're writing that third quarter check, why they should vote for him. So you got to give the guy a little bit of credit that he's looking out in his mind for the taxpayer, not as much for his political career.
And I get all of that. I just think that the financial team looked at sustainability. And if we continue to put $1.5 million to $2 million back to the rate on an annual basis, which we believe we could sustain, all things being equal, we don't think we could sustain 2.8 the following year. And if that's the case, then we need to take the 800,000 back times 2.
Well, and
So
let me
you're
just,
going to write a check for $128
the issue you're going to have to get through is, I take $64 today, or I trust that you won't spend my $64, you'll put it towards debt, and I'll get $8 a year
Right.
for the next 20 years.
I'm sorry, I want my change. I'm not gonna, when I get my bill and I pay the waitress at the restaurant, I don't wanna be like, don't worry about it. I'm gonna save it for next time you come in, and I'm gonna credit your meal. I'm sorry. We had a one-time thing, and proportionally, $2.8 million is still not even proportional to what we had last year. It was $3 million in free cash last year. We gave back 1.8. We have 5.7 this year. 2 is not proportional.
And that'll be the fun for the night. You know, we always have the pool to decide which article is going to take up 90% of the town meeting. My bet is it's going to be this one. So we'll see. But as always, thanks for joining tonight. May God bless. May tomorrow be a better day than today. And take really strong pride in the fact that we're arguing over how much money to give back and how big of a surplus we have and how much of free cash we keep. There are a lot of towns around that aren't in that enviable position. Good night, all.
Thanks for having us, Al.
Thank you.
Not too long since I've been